Hello everyone and welcome to Music Theory with Gem. In this installment of Analyzing Harmony, we're going to be taking a look at Good Night Until Tomorrow from Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation. Before we get into any music theory, however, let's take a listen to the music. The tonality of this theme is F sharp and its mode is minor. Harmonically, we're dealing with F sharp minor, D major, B minor, G major, and then again F sharp minor. These are the 1, flat 6, 4, and flat 2 chords, respectively. Rather than appear in their triadic forms, however, each chord has been given a number of extensions. The 7th and 9th of every chord appear, and the sharp 11 and 13 appear on D major and G major, respectively. Some of these extensions appear briefly, whereas others last the entire duration of the chord. Some extensions will resolve in expected ways, whereas others may not. And the only extension that could be suggested that has not been mentioned here is the 11th appearing on F sharp minor in the end. This note acts far less like an extension compared to any of the others and to me is purely an embellishing tone. As such, I do not consider it to be a genuine chord tone and will not include it. So altogether we have the progression of F sharp minor 9, D major 9 sharp 11, B minor 9, G major 13, and then again F sharp minor 9. Now that we know what we're working with, let's talk about the structural design of these chords. In this context, how do they function? Well, to me, every chord that appears between the two F sharp minor chords is a chord of prolongation. That said, there are two different layers of embellishments occurring. So at the core we have simply an F sharp minor 9 chord. The first embellishing layer is formed by the 4th chord, G major 13, which is used as a neighbor chord expanding the tonic area by stepping away and then returning. The second layer, which adds D major 9, sharp 11, and B minor 9, is a sequential progression built from descending thirds. This is determined by the first 4 chords each being built a third apart. F sharp to D is a major third, D to B is a minor third, and B to G is another major third. When we arrive to G major, however, the sequence ends by breaking the pattern and descending by a minor second to F sharp, rather than by a third to a chord built from either E sharp or E natural. Sequential progressions are, by default, prolongational, and they typically are emphasizing the initiating and ending chords on a structural level, thus reinforcing the notion that G major stands alone in its own layer of embellishment. This is essentially all there is to this piece regarding what harmony is used and how it functions. F sharp minor is the structural harmony and is prolonged by the neighbor chord, G major, which is delayed by a sequential progression of descending thirds. With this in mind, we're now ready to look at the finer details of the theme. We'll begin by taking a look at what appears to be a number of arpeggios in the second staff. First, we have an ascending arpeggio of F sharp minor 9. Though it begins while F sharp minor is sounding, G sharp arrives when the harmony has switched over to D major, making G sharp an augmented 11th relative to the underlying harmony. When B minor sounds, we hear another ascending arpeggio, which, similar to the first, can be viewed as an arpeggio of an extended 9th chord, this time being D major 9. Unlike before, this arpeggio is not built from the root of the underlying harmony. Instead, it begins from the chord's third. Like before, however, when the final note of the ascent arrives, the harmony is sounding a new chord. This time it is G major, and the final note, E, is heard as a 13th. Rather than remain on E, we hear a falling line built with the notes E, D, B, G, which can be viewed as either a descending E minor 7 or G6 arpeggio. In the final measure, the initial F sharp minor 9 arpeggio returns, only this time the harmony will remain on F sharp minor throughout, and the line has been extended with additional notes. Upon arriving to G sharp, the line dips down to F sharp, leaps to B, and then chromatically falls back to G sharp. The design of this line is fairly straightforward, but make note of two things. Firstly, the step down to F sharp can be viewed as a melodic substitution of A. The use of this melodic substitution provides a greater sense of variety. Secondly, the final four notes form a classic and commonly heard VGM motif. This is an interesting moment because harmonically, G-sharp sounds unresolved. Melodically, however, it feels somewhat resolved because of the chromatically descending third. Keep this in mind as we listen to the line in isolation now, but also when we listen to it in full at the end of the episode. Before we move on to another staff, I want to point out that these arpeggios can be reduced to a simple melodic line that is designed to prolong the note F sharp. If we contract the arpeggios to being only their beginning and ends, we end up with the line F sharp, G sharp, D, E, G, F sharp. And this line can be viewed as a combination of two simple embellishments. The first one consists of F sharp being embellished by its upper neighbor tone, G sharp, which then descends chromatically back to F sharp by passing through G natural. And the second set would be F sharp leaping down by a third to D and then ascending by step passing through E. Anyways, now let's move on to the top staff. Here we have another indicator that F sharp minor is the core element or the structural harmony to this short theme, and that is because the entire melody is an arpeggiation of F sharp minor. An interesting point is that during beats 1 through 3 of measure 1, we hear a descending leap of a third, followed by a repeat of the note leapt to before leaping again, such as G sharp leaping down to E, then sounding E again before leaping down to C sharp. On beat 4, however, this motif has been retrograded so that A on the and of 3 immediately leaps down to F sharp rather than repeating A before leaping. This places A on the back half of the beat, setting up the melody to end on A. So rather than this, we end up with this. It's a subtle difference, but is certainly effective. Structurally, this whole idea can be reduced to simply G sharp ascending to A. Rather than ascend by a minor second, however, A lies a major seventh below, and is filled out with interposing leaps of thirds. And now let's tackle the remaining grand staff. Here we have chord voicings that heavily reinforce the notion that the descending thirds progression is really an embellishment of the progression F sharp minor, G major, F sharp minor. I say this because all of the counterpoint indicates that D major and B minor are simply delaying the arrival of G major. Notice that in each beat only one voice changes. Not only that, but once said voice changes, it remains intact until the arrival of G major. To make this easier to see, any notes that are the result of oblique motion will be lowered in opacity. Now we can see from beat 1 to 2, only A moves by leaping down to F sharp. Once it arrives, it doesn't move. Next we have E descending by step to D. And lastly we have C sharp descending by step to B. At this point we arrive to G major, and what happens next? Every voice moves simultaneously to the final voicing. So with this in mind, we can remove these interposing voicings, leaving only the voicings of F sharp minor, G major, and then again F sharp minor. An interesting point to consider now is how the voicing for G major doubles up on function by possessing not only neighbor tones, but also passing tones, which are used to connect the first and second voicings of F sharp minor. B is passed through connecting C sharp to A, and D is passed through connecting E to C sharp. So yeah, for such a small theme, there is certainly a lot going on that we can learn from. So with all of the previous ideas in mind, let's take another listen to Good Night Until Tomorrow, and then bring this episode to a close. For those of you that are patrons, you can expect to receive a PDF containing the analysis present in this episode. I do not expect to make any additional commentaries on this particular piece, but if I do, you'll gain access to those as well. Of course, as my patrons, it is encouraged that, should you have any thoughts or questions regarding this analysis or the theme as a whole, reach out to me. For those of you that are not patrons but would like to support my endeavors, be certain to subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment below, and share the video as often as you can on any social media platforms. If you find yourself wanting to take your support to the next level, hop on over to patreon.com/gim and consider pledging some coin. If you are not a user of Patreon or simply want to make a single financial contribution, you can do so via PayPal, the link to which can be found in the description below. These videos do take a lot of time and effort, so any support on your end is greatly appreciated. Either way, until next time, thank you for watching this episode of Music Theory with Gim.